You launch The Ordinary in 2016?
Yeah, at the end of 2016.
At the end of 2016. And then 2017 is The Ordinary's breakout year.
Yeah.
Breakout year, how do you quantify that? Give us an idea.
The minute it launched, we couldn't keep it in stock. It was, and again, so The Ordinary was the 11th brand that we came up with a concept for.
Wait, that violates the name.
I know.
It was meant to be 10.
But we don't focus, so we can change our mind.
Wow.
So we kept going, and...
What's the Latin word for 11?
I don't know, maybe a company name change. With The Ordinary, I don't think we ever thought we never dreamt it would become what it's become today. We launched The Ordinary out of frustration that there wasn't enough transparency in the world of skincare. And, we took inspiration from the world of pharmacy. If you have a headache, you can go into a pharmacy, you buy paracetamol, you're going to be paying, 50p to £3. It's a very small window. No one can sell you paracetamol for £100 because you know the ingredient, you know the milligram. The trust is there because the transparency has been in that industry. That didn't exist in the world of skincare, which meant that if you walked into a beauty hall to pick a skincare product, you may see actually a relatively similar formula being sold for £10, being sold for £100, and actually not really understanding what's the difference. Is it the marketing you're paying for? We kind of have this assumption, does paying more mean more? But if you go into Boots and you see a new £100 painkiller, are you going to trust it? Or are you just going to take the ingredient that's safe and effective and trusted? And I think the reason we were feeling frustrated was because for NEOD, we were really using brand new technologies that were very expensive and no one else was using these. It was kind of true innovation. So we said, well, actually, let's take this approach of people, because again, some of the ingredients we use in The Ordinary, they may have been around for decades. That's not a bad thing. If something's been around for a long time, there's so much research done, there's so much safety. And again, just like paracetamol, aspirin, we don't always need new if you've actually found a solution that has incredible effects. We presented the concept of The Ordinary to two significant retailers, two of our, big partners now, who both said no to launching the brand. And this was when we were kind of still at concept stage before we'd even produce the first product. They said it was too confusing. White boxes will collect dust. You need to just rename the products to be anti-aging serum, radiance serum. Effectively just what everyone else looked like in the industry. And because we had this umbrella and we had different brands, it gave us the confidence to say no, because, we were doing okay for ourselves. We could cover everyone's payroll. We kind of had traction with some of the other brands. So we said, no, let's follow our gut, which again, is a privilege to be able to say that, because I know for so many entrepreneurs, cash flow is a killer, and it can be so difficult to say no to a listing that could be worth significant money. But we said, actually, no, we really believe that actually this transparency is what's missing in the beauty industry. So, The Ordinary launched, and it just honestly was a rocket ship that even today, and throughout our VP of supply chain we're producing 400,000 units every single day at the moment in our manufacturing in Toronto. We still have retailers. If you go into Boots, you'll still see lots of out of stocks on the shelf. We still struggle to keep up with demand 6 years later since we launched the brand. And that it's just been an incredible story. But we look back at 2017, we knew we needed kind of more money to scale. So we started looking for investment.
Which is how many months after launch?
The Ordinary was 3 months old. Deciem was 4 years old. And again, we were doing okay. We had some success stories, not anywhere near the scale of kind of where The Ordinary went to. We met with different private equity firms. There was another huge conglomerate who we had lots of meetings with. And we ended up meeting with Estee Lauder companies in April. And it was 8 weeks from our very first meeting to the deal being signed, which was due diligence, negotiations, everything. It was, especially for a corporate with a board, a public company, it was just this huge energy. From the moment they came to Toronto, the kind of M&A team, then they were like, we need you to come to New York. We want you to meet Leonard, we want to meet you, Fabrizio, our CEO, we want you to kind of meet this team. And I remember seeing Fabrizio, the CEO, who I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for. And the deal was done within like 30 minutes of meeting, because they just saw this, I think the energy, particularly from Brandon, like Brandon and I were in the room, like just this creativity, this passion. And The Ordinary was just starting to kind of create these kind of rumbles. And I think they, ultimately they believed in the concept. They believed in what we wanted to do. So the deal signed in June. They became a minority investor. They took 29% of the company. And actually, with Deciem today, we have had more time with ELC than without ELC.
ELC?
Estee Lauder companies.
Okay.
When acquisitions happen, I think companies go from 0 to 100%. We're at 70, they own 76% now of Deciem, and it will go to 100% next summer. And actually that process will have been 7 years, which actually is one, I think, quite forward. I haven't seen many deals like that done, I think, between kind of a startup and a larger company. But actually it's just been this amazing different chapters of us both getting to know each other, learning each other's strengths. I think having a lot of respect for, where we need help and where we kind of need to be left alone. So actually it's just been this really nice journey. And, Deciem, we're in our 10th year this year. And 6 years of those, we've had the partnership of Estee Lauder companies. 29%
they took. And it's rumoured the valuation was about 1.5 billion.
In the 2021 investment.
Okay, right.
Yeah, it was, I think, valued at $2.2 billion US.
And at that early stage, I'm trying to figure out, 4 years into Deciem, Estee Lauder put some money in. What was the valuation at that point when they took the 29%?
It had been about 160 million.
Okay, Jesus. Okay, super interesting. I mean, it's a very quick trajectory relative to most companies in that space to achieve those valuations in such a space of time. We move on then from 2017 to 2018. And this is really where Brandon's behavior started to change.
It truly happened what felt like overnight. So at the end of 2017, so we closed the investment in the summer. And again, The Ordinary at the end of 2017, it's a year old. It's having this incredible, just people are warming to it. People are loving the concept. I always think The Ordinary is like a community brand because it really was spread through word of mouth endorsements. And I remember my husband and I, we went to New Zealand and Australia for kind of the Christmas break. And then I remember getting this call from Brandon saying, you need to go straight to the airport with he was like, have you got your passport? I said, yes. He said, you go straight to the airport now, book a first class flight, come straight to Toronto on the next flight, turn your phone off, turn your emails. He was just like, calm down, let's be relaxed, but you need to come immediately.
So he didn't tell you why?
No, but I could just sense it was an entirely different person I was speaking to.
All of a sudden?
Over that break in the holidays. I mean, the flight from Australia to Toronto, I think I was on the plane traveling for about 20 hours. I cried the entire way because I knew something really bad was happening. And I guess to just kind of towards the end of 2017, and again, I have to say Brandon is someone who he would have like one drink in the month. Like he barely drank. As far as I'm aware, we spent so much time together, like wouldn't do drugs, was just he was high on energy and happy as just drinking Diet Coke and eating fries with ketchup type person. Towards the end of 2017, he'd become intrigued, I think, by magic mushrooms and just kind of this idea of, can you access different parts of your brain? And again, this was just something like in Amsterdam where it's legal and it's kind of just this, almost just this inquisitive, actually, how does the mind work? And I knew he'd planned to go to Amsterdam over New Year to kind of experiment with some of his learnings on kind of mushrooms and in different dosages. And I'm someone who's quite anti-drugs. Like I've always been I like to be well behaved. I don't like to kind of break any rules in those senses. And I just had this awful feeling. And I came back to Toronto and he summoned, around 10 of us to have this meeting in the distillery store, which was one of our Deciem stores in Toronto that we closed for the day. And everything had changed. And it was just like talking to a stranger. He had this like coldness in his eyes. And he'd gone from someone who, the second you see him, there'd be hugs. There was just so much warmth. All of his emails would have hearts on. It was just kind of all of this love in messages and kind of just being, to just this almost kind of zoned out, cold person that suddenly almost felt like kind of just had this like, it's like he didn't understand. There was no understanding anymore between him and any of us. He spoke around things where, we're too caught up now in the concept of time. So, for example, he said to me like the next day when, we'd meet for coffee, and, our routine for the previous 4 years has been, he'd text me, he'd be like, I'll pick you up at 7 a.m. We'd go to a coffee shop, we'd get, breakfast and head to the office. And he suddenly was like, there's no time anymore. I'm going to meet you in the coffee shop tomorrow, but we don't need to tell each other a time. We'll just be there when we're supposed to be there. And I remember finding it really hard because he truly is such a genius and a visionary. And this has happened so quickly. And I remember like ringing Sean and saying like, does he have a point? Like, are we too caught up in time? Like, is this just like, are we taking things the wrong way? So I had a lot of confusion just around like, how can something change so quickly? And again, this is someone who, over the 4 or 5 years of being like insanely close to him, I was going to Toronto at this point for like 3 weeks out of the month, and we'd have every dinner together, breakfast together, lunch together, every weekend together, and never seeing any episodes of mental health or anything changing. So suddenly you have this drastic change of someone you loved, but someone suddenly who feels like he's completely closing the door to you and kind of pushing you out. This was an indifferent person who was angry, shouting, crying, scary. It was suddenly very cold to everyone. And then, so where everyone's very confused, very upset. And then there's business things that start to happen that make no sense, that are actually quite mean. Cancelling a brand on Instagram, a big partnership we had done with someone, cancelling a retailer on
so
Instagram.
He went on Instagram and said to your following on Instagram that
this brand's no longer going to exist. So
before telling them?
Yeah. So we'd spent all of this time with Dr. Esho building this brand.
I know Dr. Esho.
Yeah. And then it cancelled. Like T-John found out on Instagram with everyone else that this brand that he'd put all this passion and energy in was ended. Retailers were ended. It was just horrible. So I did challenge him. And what happened when I challenged him was I got a meanest response around how I just don't understand him, of all the people I should understand.
Gaslighting.
And just, and be like, you look back and like nothing was making any sense. And then I got fired because again, and he wasn't technically allowed to, like, you need board approval and all of these things, but there was no rational actions at this time. So this just accelerated so quickly. And then it's so difficult because then anyone who's trying to help gets pushed out. So then and again, like in the background, like because it's all of these early team members, like everyone wants to help him and protect him. And everyone's like, what do we do? And that's the hardest thing about, mental health and drug abuse, which then like circle together. But ultimately, when it's affecting someone's brain, they can't necessarily recognize that themselves. And someone said to me, it's like you're speaking Polish to them. You may think you're speaking English, a common language. There is no understanding in that conversation of what each other is saying. And actually that did start to make sense, but it was just very difficult. And I think, again, I got fired in February. So like a month into this, and it'd been the worst month of my life, like truly like horrendous, like so emotionally difficult.
What happened in that break? Do you know? Have you got any suspicions?
Yeah, I think he was very curious, and I think he took everything to an extreme. And I think he'd been reading a lot around psychedelics and kind of how to access different parts of your brain. And I think he experimented a lot during that break.
And do you think that triggered some kind of psychotic episode?
Yeah.
So on that point about being fired,
Yeah.
how were you fired?
I knew it was coming.
What? How? Why?
Because I'd gone from being, we were inseparable, to I was suddenly pushed out of everything, excluded from conversations, emails. He came to London. I was in London at the time when I got fired. And again, when he'd landed in London, from the minute he landed to the minute he left, we would be together. And I barely saw him.
How did that feel?
So hurtful, because hurtful and confusing and just really hard. And I guess you have like a whole team who are like, what's happening? Everyone is scared because it's a very strong personality who now could take anything anyone in the team said the wrong way, and kind of someone could be at the end of quite, an explosion of anger, which again was never there before. So it's just a very difficult situation, of one where you don't even understand it, which I think is what makes it so hard. But I think at that point we didn't maybe know the extent of how things were going to spiral from there, or how mentally unwell he was. Because 6 weeks earlier, he'd been the Brandon like we all knew and loved. So it was such a quick turnaround and change. And I remember getting a call from the person who ran our HR at the time. And I remember just saying, like, I know, like, he wants to fire me. And obviously she said, yeah. And then, and I remember just like crying my eyes out. And actually at the time, the person from Estee Lauder Companies who was on the M&A team, who's based in New York, he was in London at the time. And I went to meet him. And I remember just saying, like, I'm scared because I don't know what's happening. And this is someone who's just entirely changed. And I don't know what to do to help him. And I remember then, the confusion of someone's now acting. It doesn't matter what agreements are in place. This is now someone acting irrationally. But we've got to act in a certain way because it's someone who is so unpredictable in the way. And again, I think at this point I hadn't really realised how bad things were going to be. And, part of you thinks like, maybe it is me, like, maybe I'm not the right person to be there anymore. And maybe for whatever reason, like, he thinks I don't believe in the vision, or things have just changed. My husband, who's like the most supportive person in the world, but also very calm, takes such a relaxed approach to anything. Like, nothing is a problem to him in his world, in a very positive way. He booked us a holiday. He was like, let's just get away. And it's been like a very hard month. Right now, Brandon doesn't want you. We can't change that. So let's just focus on just taking a moment just to kind of reflect. And obviously I'd always wanted children. We'd been married for a few years at this time. I'd never wanted them whilst I was in the busyness of Deciem, because I wanted the time to enjoy being, a mum of young children. So we were like, let's try and have a baby. So I got pregnant in the March. And
a month later.
Yeah. And but then at that point things were spiraling with Brandon, and abusive emails were being sent, targeting everyone. He was firing so many people within the business, firing people and copying the whole company in, copying retailers in, press in. And it became clear things were really unwell. And I remember, I think, being about 6 weeks pregnant, and I was being targeted on some of these emails. And I remember thinking, if I tell him I'm pregnant, because I know he's so kind, that maybe he'll leave me alone, or it might impose something. And then he announced it on Instagram when I was 6 weeks pregnant. And again, when something like that happens, someone's not rational. No good human being does that to someone. And then it became really hard because I was still in this situation of loving him so much, wanting to help him, feeling just not knowing what to do. Also having like the company, like having everyone still coming to me asking me like, what should we do? Because you've got someone saying things that make no sense and being, he was just very, very unwell. So I was still trying to like help people in the background, keep things going with the business. Obviously, trying to be in the early stages of pregnancy, which now obviously the whole world knew. And it was just really, really hard. And I remember when he first got sectioned, feeling such a sense of relief that he was finally going to get the treatment he needed to get better. And it was actually in London when he got sectioned for the first time. And then he was out 5 days later. And then that was the start of, over that 2018. He got sectioned 5 times across London, across Canada, across America. And each time would just get released a short period after. And then that's when I started to almost kind of, you lose the hope of like, how can we help this person when he keeps getting into these terrible, like, to get sectioned, you're in a terrible situation for authorities to actually come in and remove you for your own safety. But then this would just happen again, and it's almost like there wasn't even a connection between like the countries and the medical systems and kind of like how that all works is confusing. But he asked in the June, he was sending me videos crying and just saying like, I need you back, I don't know what I've done, like I'm so sorry. And I remember feeling like I can't help if I'm not there. Maybe if I'm with him, maybe I can help him. So I went back, and the first week I went back, we went to Morocco because he was like, we need to plan, like we need to get the business thing sorted again. And actually it felt like a normal-ish conversation. So I remember feeling like, maybe things can get better. And I remember the week in Morocco, just things were worse than ever. Things had got even worse in that time I'd been away. And it's a helpless situation. And I have so much empathy for anyone the people who struggle with mental health and addiction, but also for the people surrounding them, because it's a very toxic environment to be in. One, because you're being abused, but secondly, you're losing the loved person, and thirdly, you just feel like you can't help, because again, with so many other health issues, when you're not battling with the brain, there's more acceptance of treatment to get better. But that just doesn't exist in the same way.
I can tell how much you loved him.
Honestly, he was like, and this is what I find so hard, like he really was so kind and like would do anything. And again, like, when I talk about Deciem being a family, in his estate, in his will, every single beneficiary is a Deciem employee. Like that's this family bond that was just so strong. So just to see that go, and again, like everything was played out on Instagram. Brandon was doing all of these posts in terrible situations, and it's a very hard line. I mean, we talk to Instagram like this. It's such a difficult. You have free speech. You have someone like it's a platform, like people can post what they want. Some things would get removed, others wouldn't. But it was just an awful situation to be in. And I think everyone just had such a huge desire to help him. And like in this time period, I mean, even like SA Lauder companies were behind the scenes. They were so supportive to us. But again, you have, you go on Instagram and you see all these comments. Why is no one helping him? What are you all doing? And again, it's so hard because people don't see that situation of it is pretty much impossible to help. And then you have people that say, look, someone has to reach rock bottom. Like they have to just reach rock bottom until they get better. So then in October, Brandon had done an Instagram post basically saying he was shutting down the entire company and there would be no more Deciem. And obviously that was the point when the shareholders had to step in, because suddenly, I think at that point we had 800 employees, like there was everyone's jobs on the line. And again, you think, look, maybe this is the kind of bottom point he needs to reach to actually understand he needs to get help. So that's when the court order happened to remove Brandon from the company, which again is an incredibly hard situation because no one wants to remove the founder who they care so much about. And, a founder who is such a visionary and is the brand, like to feel like he is being forcibly removed from his own company is very difficult. But you've also got a situation where everything was public. So every email sent had the whole company on CC, had all the journalists, had all of our retailers, had customers on. Instagram posts were obviously going to everyone. So you're also living this out in public, which I think also makes it a lot harder. So in October, he got removed as the CEO.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.